I'm Karina Mitchell, and this is your Our News Now Rewind. Stories making the headlines for the week ending May 7th, 2011. Our top stories include: after more than 9 years, U.S. forces catch and kill Osama bin Laden. The president visits New York to lay a wreath at the site of the World Trade Center attacks. Africa braces for a terrorist backlash in response to bin Laden's death. A South African lesbian activist is killed in a so-called corrective rape attack. A Pittsburgh Steeler says he's not pro-bin Laden. And as the second-to-last space shuttle leaves for space, we take a look back on the African Americans who have made it to the final frontier. With a $25 million bounty over his head, he eluded capture for over 9 years after planning the World Trade Center attacks. But this week, a U.S. president can finally say Osama bin Laden is dead. The leader of al-Qaeda was cornered in a compound in Pakistan where he was believed to be hiding for years. An elite U.S. Navy SEAL team acting on months of intelligence gathering trapped bin Laden in this upstairs room where he was shot and killed.
We will be relentless in defense of our citizens and our friends and allies. We will be true to the values that make us who we are. And on nights like this one, we can say to those families who have lost loved ones to al-Qaeda's terror, justice has been done.
The president approved the strike without informing Pakistani officials who have expressed both anger and embarrassment over the situation. The al-Qaeda leader was discovered just a few blocks from a Pakistani army barrack in Islamabad. Bin Laden's body received a burial at sea after SEALs transported the body to an undisclosed location and loaded his corpse into a weighted coffin. The president has said he will not release photos of bin Laden's corpse. To commemorate the loss of those killed in the World Trade Center attacks, the president visited New York to lay a wreath at the site of Ground Zero. The quickly planned event is designed to mark the death of the mastermind who plotted the deaths of nearly 3,000 people killed on September 11th. It preludes the 10-year anniversary of the attacks, which occurred in New York, at the Pentagon, and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, where passengers fought hijackers to bring a fourth plane to the ground. The event was attended by New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani. Former President George W. Bush declined an invitation to attend. Republicans who have been blasting Mr. Obama for months on a variety of issues were relatively silent this week, but that quiet was short-lived as GOP hopefuls squared off in the first major debate of the Republican primaries. Former Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty, former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum, Texas Representative Ron Paul, businessman Herman Cain, and former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson faced off in Greenville, South Carolina. While the hopefuls spent some time defining their differences, they spent most of their efforts attacking the president.
The issues that have come up while he's been president, he's gotten it wrong strategically every single time.
Between those two examples, inconsistencies in the president's decisions and in his actions.
He did a good job, and I tip my cap to him in that moment. But that moment is not the sum total of America's foreign policy.
Sarah Palin, Mitt Romney, and Donald Trump all skipped the event. In your Our News Now World Wrap, Africa braces for a terrorist backlash after the death of Osama bin Laden, and a U.S. businessman sits in a South American prison on what U.S. officials are calling a no-evidence case. Kenya has tightened security along its border and in its capital of Nairobi since the announcement of bin Laden's death. Kenya was one site of a bin Laden-orchestrated attack on 2 U.S. embassies in Africa back in 1998. More than 200 Kenyans and 19 Americans died. In Nicaragua, a U.S. businessman has been held in prison there for more than 175 days. U.S. officials say Jason Puracal has been detained on no evidence whatsoever. Puracal was born in Tacoma but moved to the South American country after joining the Peace Corps. He decided to stay on and became an international real estate agent. In November of last year, police arrested Puracal at his home and charged him with drug trafficking. U.S. Congressman Adam Smith says that despite searching his home, office, and computer without warrants, investigators have no evidence against Puracal. His next court date is scheduled for May 16th. He faces 30 years in prison if convicted. In South Africa, a young woman is raped and murdered. Gay rights groups believe she was targeted because she was a lesbian activist. 24-year-old Noxola Nogwaza was found in a Johannesburg alley last week, the victim of what some have described as corrective rape. The attack is one in a series of assaults on lesbians, gays, and transgenders in South Africa since 2008. Ms. Nogwaza was stoned and stabbed after an altercation at a bar near where her body was found. No arrests have been made. And that's your World Wrap. In sports news, a Pittsburgh Steeler may need a terrible towel to hide his head in this week after making a controversial tweet following the death of Osama bin Laden. Running back Rashard Mendenhall has backed off from the tweet that started it all. In a commentary about the celebrations taking place after the announcement of bin Laden's death, Mendenhall wrote, "What kind of person celebrates death? And it's amazing how people can hate a man they've never even heard speak. We've only heard one side," he went on to add. After being blogged as an Osama lover, the athlete issued an apology which said, "I wasn't questioning bin Laden's evil acts. I believe that he will have to face God for what he's done." He went on to say, "I apologize for the timing," and said, "But it was not meant to do harm." And in business news, Lexus and Mercedes may dominate music videos, but they're nowhere to be seen on the top 10 list of cars purchased by African Americans in the U.S. The top spot on that list, according to Polk Research, goes to Toyota, which made up more than 15% of the 641,000 cars registered to blacks in the U.S. The Japanese automaker is followed by Ford, Chevrolet, Honda, and Nissan. GMC and Volkswagen round out the list. Reality and hip-hop star Flavor Flav is in trouble with the law again, this time in Las Vegas. Flav, whose real name is William Drayton, was picked up after a stop for a series of misdemeanor traffic violations. The artist, who starred in Flavor of Love and was part of the group Public Enemy, was released after he paid the fines. After weeks of digs from Apprentice star Donald Trump, the president finally strikes back. Mr. Obama got some well-earned payback during the Correspondents' Dinner in Washington, D.C. He and host Seth Meyers made fun of the Donald, picking on everything from his hair to his choice of color at the White House should he be elected president.
Mr. Trump, he certainly would bring some change to the White House. Let's see what we've got up there.
Obama said now that the issue over his birth certificate has been settled, Trump can move on to more important issues, like who really killed JFK and where Biggie and Tupac are. And finally, as the second-to-last shuttle prepares to complete its mission in space, we learned that African Americans will not form part of the crews that closed down America's space program. They have, however, been important to NASA over the years. ONN's Gary Anthony Ramsey takes a look at blacks with the right stuff.
Booster ignition and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery, returning to the space station, paving the way for future missions beyond.
In the history of NASA and commercial spaceflight, 332 Americans have held the title of astronaut, with 298 actually making a trip beyond the clouds into space. In that list is a very small set of 19 African Americans, 14 of whom have made it to the final frontier. The first among them was Guy Bluford, an engineer and Air Force colonel who made his historic trip on August 30th, 1983. He was the first African American into space, but he was not the first black in orbit or the first African American astronaut. Cuban Arnaldo Tamayo Mendez, who flew in the Russian space program, made his trip 3 years earlier in 1980. And in 1967, Air Force Colonel Robert Lawrence was the first African American astronaut candidate, but tragically would die in a training accident later that year. Dr. Mae Jemison became the first black woman in space in 1992. Bluford would make 4 trips over 9 years, the most of the African-American astronaut class, followed by Charles Bolden, who made 4 trips over 8 years. Bolden is NASA's current administrator, the first black to hold that title on a permanent basis. He will oversee the current program shutdown. There is Stephanie Wilson, an engineer and mission specialist who's made 3 trips to space and is the last black woman to go. Frederick Gregory, an Air Force colonel who was the first black to command a space mission, who has flown 3 times in his career. Dr. Bernard Harris was the first black to walk into space. He would be followed by Robert Kerbeen, who's made 7 spacewalks on 3 missions, and Winston Scott, who's made 3 spacewalks over 2. Alvin Drew and former pro football player Leland Melvin have each flown twice in their careers. Joan Higginbotham, an engineer, flew on the Discovery mission in 2006. Robert Satcher was the first orthopedic surgeon into space and is a veteran of 2 spacewalks himself. The small percentage of blacks in the space program has not spared them from the risks or sacrifices of space flight. Dr. Ronald McNair died in the Challenger disaster in 1986, and Air Force Colonel Michael Anderson died in the Columbia disaster of 2003. And behind the scenes of NASA, there were scientists like Dr. Emmett Chappell and Dr. George Carruthers, who helped plan missions and keep astronauts safe. And then there was Dr. Harriet Jenkins, who worked to diversify what was once an all-white agency. What was crucial for all these participants was an interest and excellence in math and science. For future generations, now in school or even in diapers, those minimum qualifications will remain the same. As our children learn and grow, shouldn't it be the goal of all of us as parents to make sure that these interests are just as stimulated as their joystick fingers? So that when America decides to return to real outer space, we can return as well, next time, in greater numbers. Gary Anthony Ramsey, Our News Now.
Expected data hits, it'll clear shortly.
For a complete look at any of the stories you've seen on The Rewind, be sure to head to the bottom of the web page, find the story you want, and click your way through it. That's your Our News Now Rewind for this week. I'm Karina Mitchell.